Close your eyes for a moment and picture this: your hands resting on weathered, sun-warmed stone, feeling the subtle grooves carved not by time alone, but by thousands of sand-daled feet, hooves, and cart wheels over 2 millennia. You're standing on a bridge that witnessed empires rise and fall, a structure that carried not just people and goods, but dreams, ideas, and the very pulse of civilization itself. We often think of ancient bridges as simple crossings, practical solutions to geographic obstacles. But what if I told you they were so much more? These remarkable constructions were nothing short of living, breathing connectors of human experience, silent witnesses to the flow of history, culture, and connection. From the mighty arched bridges of Rome that supported legions on the march, to the graceful spans along China's Silk Road that welcomed caravans heavy with silk and spice, to the daring rope bridges suspended high in the Andes that united mountain communities, each of these structures tells a story far grander than stone and mortar. They were economic lifelines, military marvels, cultural crossroads, and profound symbols of what humans can achieve when we reach, quite literally, across divides. They didn't just connect two pieces of land, they wove together distant peoples, enabled the sharing of knowledge and belief, and laid the groundwork for the world we know today. In this video, we're setting out on a journey to explore these ancient wonders not as static relics of the past, but as active participants in the human story. We'll traverse continents and centuries, uncovering how these bridges fueled trade, enabled conquest, spread ideas, and even shaped the way we see connection itself, both physical and metaphorical. This is about rediscovering the ambition, ingenuity, and spirit of collaboration that went into building these pathways. So come with me, let's walk in the footsteps of merchants, soldiers, pilgrims, and poets, and discover how ancient bridges connected more than just land, they connected us all. Picture the very first time a human being looked at a rushing river or a deep ravine and thought, "I need to get to the other side." This fundamental human impulse to overcome a barrier is where our story truly begins, long before empires and marble arches. The earliest bridges were acts of pure, simple ingenuity. A fallen tree across a stream, carefully placed stepping stones. These were the prehistoric prototypes, the first drafts of an idea that would eventually circle the globe. But as societies grew from nomadic tribes into settled communities, the need for more permanent and reliable crossings became impossible to ignore. This was no longer just about individual passage. It was about the movement of entire communities, their goods, their armies, and their ideas. In the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, often called the cradle of civilization, we find some of the earliest evidence of deliberate bridge construction. The ancient Sumerians, masters of brickwork, are believed to have built rudimentary arches and short spans to connect their great ziggurats and canals. While few physical remnants survive, their architectural principles, etched into clay tablets, show a clear understanding of how to span a gap. This knowledge would travel and evolve, setting a foundational stone for all future engineering. Meanwhile, along the Nile, the Egyptians demonstrated a different kind of brilliance suited to their environment. For military expeditions and trade caravans needing to cross the great river, building a permanent stone bridge was often impractical. Their solution was the pontoon bridge, a floating pathway made by lashing boats together and laying planks across their decks. Imagine the spectacle of Pharaoh's army, thousands of soldiers and chariots, marching confidently across the water on a temporary, yet sturdy, floating bridge. This was bridge building as a tool of immediate, mobile power, showcasing an understanding that connection could be both temporary and tremendously effective. Over in ancient Greece, a civilization celebrated for its philosophy and art, bridge building took on a more refined structural form. The Greeks preferred wooden bridges for their main spans, but they pioneered the use of stone piers, solid, dependable towers of masonry built up from the riverbed to support the wooden roadway above. This hybrid approach was a stroke of genius. It combined the relative ease and speed of working with wood for the long span with the immense strength and durability of stone at the critical support points. These bridges were vital links between the independent city-states, facilitating not just trade but the incredible exchange of ideas that would define Greek culture. What's crucial to understand about these early innovations is that they were never just about convenience. A reliable bridge meant a merchant could get his wares to a distant market before they spoiled. It meant a messenger could carry news between villages in hours instead of days. It meant an army could respond to a threat with stunning speed, projecting power across terrain that was once a defensive barrier. Every log placed across a creek, every stone pier sunk into a riverbed was a statement of ambition. It was humanity declaring that distance and geography would not dictate the limits of their community, their commerce, or their curiosity. These early engineers, working with little more than observation, muscle, and raw intellect, were laying the groundwork for everything that was to come. They were the unsung pioneers who first dared to connect the dots of a disparate world. Now, think about the sheer distance a single Roman merchant might have traveled, from the bustling ports of Alexandria across the Mediterranean, up the Italian peninsula on the famed Via Appia, and over the sturdy bridges that carried this vital road across rivers and valleys. Without those bridges, his journey would have been a nightmare of delays and danger. Every river crossing would require finding a safe ford, waiting for a ferry, or worse, attempting a treacherous crossing that could result in lost goods, drowned animals, or even death. But a well-built bridge changed everything. It turned a risky, day-long obstacle into a matter of minutes. This wasn't just a convenience, it was a complete transformation of economic possibility. Bridges became the critical nodes in vast trading networks, the points where routes converged and goods could flow freely. Take the magnificent Anji Bridge in China's Hebei province, a masterpiece of stone engineering completed in the early 7th century. This wasn't just a way to cross a river, it was a linchpin of the Northern Silk Road. Its elegant, low-rising arch allowed heavily laden camels and carts to ascend and descend with ease, while its robust design weathered floods and earthquakes for centuries. Caravans carrying silk, lacquerware, and tea from the east met traders bringing glassware, gold, and horses from the west right there, on and around that bridge. It facilitated a constant, reliable exchange that would have been impossibly slow and costly without it. The economic impact was profound and multifaceted. First, bridges drastically reduced what economists call transaction costs. The cost of moving goods in time, in risk, in actual money paid to ferrymen or for lost shipments plummeted. A merchant could plan a journey with confidence, knowing that bridges would keep him on schedule and his cargo secure. This reliability meant he could charge less for his goods while still turning a profit, making exotic items like spices, incense, and silk more affordable and available to a wider population. Markets expanded because the bridges effectively shrank the distance between producer and consumer. Furthermore, bridges didn't just serve existing trade routes, they actively created new economic centers. A thriving bridge often became a hub of activity itself. Towns and markets would spring up at either end, catering to the constant flow of travelers. Toll houses were established, generating revenue for local authorities or the Central Empire, which could then be reinvested into maintaining the roads and bridges, a virtuous cycle of infrastructure investment. Inns, stables, blacksmiths, and warehouses all clustered around these vital crossing points, creating jobs and stimulating local economies. The bridge was no longer just a path to a destination. It was a destination in its own right, a place of commerce and community. This connectivity also allowed for the specialization of regional economies. A village that was once isolated and had to produce everything it needed could now focus on what it did best, perhaps crafting superb pottery or growing a particular grain, knowing it could easily trade its surplus for other necessities via the safe and efficient bridge network. This specialization increased overall productivity and wealth, raising the standard of living. The Roman grain shipments from Egypt and North Africa that fed the city of Rome's massive population simply could not have happened without the unbroken chain of bridges and roads that allowed for such a massive, regular logistical operation. In essence, these ancient structures were the equivalent of modern-day shipping lanes, railway hubs, and interstate highways all rolled into one. They were the fundamental infrastructure upon which economic globalization was built, centuries before the term ever existed. They enabled the movement of not just luxury items for the elite, but staples that fed cities and raw materials that fueled industries. The wealth of empires was quite literally carried across their stone backs, making them silent, steadfast partners in the creation of prosperity and the intricate web of economic interdependence that shaped the ancient world. But the story of ancient bridges isn't just one of commerce and peaceful exchange. These same structures that welcomed merchants also bore the heavy tread of soldiers' boots, serving as indispensable tools for military ambition and national defense. A river that was a peaceful boundary for one nation was a strategic obstacle for an expanding army, and the ability to cross it quickly and reliably often meant the difference between victory and defeat. This transformed bridges from economic assets into powerful instruments of warfare, projecting a nation's might and securing its borders in a very tangible way. Perhaps no single example illustrates the offensive power of military engineering more dramatically than Julius Caesar's astonishing feat across the Rhine River in 55 BCE. Facing fierce Germanic tribes on the far bank who relied on the river as their primary defense, Caesar decided to do the unthinkable. Rather than waste time commandeering boats which could be easily attacked, he ordered his legions to build a massive timber bridge directly over the wide, fast-flowing Rhine. Historians remain amazed by the speed and efficiency of this project. Using locally sourced timber and a brilliant prefabricated design for the pilings, his engineers completed the entire crossing in a mere 10 days. The psychological impact was devastating. The Germanic tribes who had felt secure behind their natural moat were suddenly faced with the unstoppable might of Roman engineering and discipline. Caesar's army marched across, demonstrated Roman power with a show of force, and then, in a final act of tactical brilliance, dismantled the bridge behind them as they withdrew. It was less a permanent invasion and more a stunning declaration. No natural barrier could protect you from Rome. This application of bridge building for rapid, unexpected offensive movement was a tactic employed by empires across the ancient world. The vast Persian Empire, under rulers like Darius and Xerxes, maintained and improved a network of roads and bridges known as the Royal Road. This infrastructure was the nervous system of their empire, allowing them to mobilize armies and shuttle supplies across immense distances with a speed that their adversaries could scarcely comprehend. It enabled them to control restive provinces and respond to rebellions with overwhelming force before local uprisings could gain momentum. The bridge, in this context, was a force multiplier, extending the reach and tightening the grip of imperial authority. Yet, the military value of a bridge was not solely offensive. Its defensive role was equally critical and often more complex. A sturdy stone bridge could be transformed into a fortified strongpoint, a chokehold where a small defending force could hold off a much larger army. Towers and gatehouses were often constructed at the bridgeheads, controlling access and allowing for the collection of tolls in peacetime, and serving as a first line of defense in war. The very act of holding a key bridge could dictate an enemy's movement, funneling them into unfavorable terrain or delaying their advance until reinforcements could arrive. Conversely, the destruction of a bridge was a classic and devastating defensive strategy. A retreating army would often dismantle or burn bridges behind them to slow a pursuing force, trading a valuable piece of infrastructure for precious time to regroup and fortify a new position. This created a heartbreaking but common sight throughout history: the smoldering ruins of a community's lifeline, sacrificed in the desperate calculus of war. The loss of a bridge could strand armies, isolate populations, and sever supply lines, making its control a primary objective for any military campaign. This dual nature, as both a gateway for invasion and a bulwark against it, cemented the bridge's reputation not merely as a passive structure, but as an active player in the theater of war, a strategic asset that commanders fought to possess and were often forced to destroy. While armies marched for conquest and merchants traveled for profit, another group of travelers moved along these ancient bridges with a different kind of cargo, one of ideas, beliefs, and artistic inspiration. Beyond their roles in war and commerce, these structures revealed perhaps their most profound function, serving as silent, steadfast conduits for the very soul of civilization. They became the meeting points where cultures could not just glimpse one another from afar, but truly intermingle, exchange, and transform. A bridge, in its essence, is a place of transition, and across these spans passed some of the most pivotal transitions in human thought, faith, and creativity. Consider the magnificent Roman bridge that still stands today in Cordoba, Spain, known as the Puente Romano. For centuries under Islamic rule, this was not merely a way to cross the Guadalquivir River. It was a vibrant artery pumping intellectual lifeblood through the heart of Al-Andalus. At one end lay the Great Mosque, a center of Islamic scholarship, and on the other, the bustling city with its Jewish and Christian quarters. Scholars, translators, and students constantly crossed this bridge, carrying with them precious texts and new ideas. In the scriptoriums and libraries nearby, Muslim, Jewish, and Christian thinkers worked side by side, translating the lost works of Greek philosophers like Aristotle and Plato from Arabic into Latin, often by way of Hebrew. This incredible cross-pollination of knowledge, facilitated by that physical connection, didn't just preserve classical learning, it supercharged it, laying the essential groundwork for the European Renaissance that would blossom centuries later. The bridge provided the literal pathway for this meeting of minds, proving that intellectual revolutions often require physical connections to ignite. This flow of ideas was equally powerful in the realm of faith. Across ancient India, a vast network of bridges and causeways stretched along sacred pilgrimage routes known as tirthas. For devout Hindus and Buddhists, a pilgrimage was a journey of spiritual transformation, and these bridges were integral to making that journey accessible to all, not just the most able-bodied. As thousands of pilgrims crossed them each year, they became more than just travelers. They were carriers of religious doctrine, artistic styles of temple architecture, and philosophical debates. A Buddhist monk traveling from Nalanda to Sri Lanka might cross a sturdy stone bridge in Odisha, sharing his interpretations of the sutras with a group of local Brahmins. A Hindu ascetic heading to Varanasi could pause on a bridge over the Ganges, exchanging ideas with a Jain scholar about the nature of the soul. This constant, peaceful movement facilitated by these structures helped diffuse religious ideas across the subcontinent, allowing Hinduism to consolidate its diverse practices and enabling Buddhism to spread from its birthplace to distant lands. The bridges ensured that faith was not a static, isolated phenomenon, but a dynamic, circulating force. The exchange was not limited to high philosophy and religion. It extended to the everyday arts and sciences that shape human life. A master stonemason from Syria, hired to work on a bridge in Byzantium, would bring with him novel techniques for carving arches, techniques that local builders would then adopt and adapt. An itinerant physician crossing a bridge in Persia might share a new herbal remedy with a colleague from India, and that knowledge would continue its journey, eventually finding its way into a medical text in Baghdad. The movement of artists, spurred by safer and more reliable travel, led to fascinating stylistic fusions. We can see this in the artwork along the Silk Road, where the graceful flow of Chinese calligraphy might blend with the geometric patterns popular in Persian art, styles that met and mingled at the river crossings that served as caravan resting points. These bridges enabled a slow, steady, and profound synthesis of human ingenuity, where a practical innovation from one culture could become a world-changing technology in another, all because someone had a safe and reliable path to carry it across a once formidable divide. In this way, these ancient structures acted as the world's first networking hubs long before the digital age. They facilitated the kind of spontaneous, face-to-face encounters that are the lifeblood of cultural innovation. They allowed for the cross-fertilization of ideas that would have otherwise remained isolated in their own cultural silos. The bridge, therefore, was more than stone and mortar. It was a platform for the human spirit to share, to learn, and to grow. It was the physical manifestation of curiosity and the desire to understand the other. By literally bringing people together, they helped forge a more intellectually rich and culturally complex world, reminding us that the most enduring connections we build are not made of stone, but of shared knowledge and mutual understanding. Yet for all their power to connect cultures and spread ideas, ancient bridges also served a far more pragmatic master: the cold, hard demands of political power. An empire is not just a collection of conquered lands. It is a living, breathing organism that requires constant nourishment and communication to survive. Without a nervous system to carry commands from the brain to the farthest limbs, that organism will quickly falter and fracture. This is where the humble bridge transcended its physical form to become one of history's most potent instruments of statecraft, a literal and symbolic link in the chain that bound diverse and distant peoples under a single banner of rule. To understand this, we must journey high into the cloud-shrouded peaks of the Andes Mountains and witness one of the most astonishing administrative feats of the ancient world: the Inca Empire. At its height, this empire stretched over 2,500 miles along the western edge of South America, a realm of unimaginable geographic complexity filled with deep ravines, rushing rivers, and towering mountain passes. Governing such a territory would be a challenge even with modern technology. For the Inca, it was an impossibility without their most ingenious innovation, the network of suspension bridges, the most famous of which is the Huayhuachaca. Crafted not from stone or wood, but from woven grasses twisted into mighty cables by the hands of local communities, these bridges swung precariously over heart-stopping drops. Every single year, in a tradition that continues to this day, the communities on either side of the canyon would gather to renew their social and political bonds by literally re-weaving the bridge together. This was infrastructure as a living, participatory ritual. The bridge was the physical proof of their connection to the central government in the capital city of Cusco. Along these slender grass ropes, the Inca's swift-footed messengers, the chasquis, would run in relay, carrying quipus-knotted cords that encoded census data, tax records, and imperial decrees. Without the Huachuca and bridges like it, the Inca could never have collected the agricultural tribute that fed the capital, mobilized labor for massive public works projects, or moved troops to quell unrest. The bridge was the absolute prerequisite for the administrative cohesion of the empire, making the impossible geography not a barrier but a bonded unit. On the other side of the world, the Roman Empire was solving the same problem of scale with a different but equally brilliant engineering solution: the immutable stone arch. The famous phrase, "all roads lead to Rome," is incomplete without adding, "and all roads cross bridges." The Roman road network, that masterpiece of logistical planning, was utterly dependent on the bridges that carried it across Europe's rivers. A road simply ended at a riverbank unless a bridge could span the water. These structures were the linchpins in a system designed for control. When the emperor issued a new edict, a law governing inheritance, a new tax policy, a declaration of war, it was written on papyrus or parchment and entrusted to imperial couriers. Their speed was legendary because their path was unimpeded. They could gallop across a stone bridge at full speed without breaking stride. This meant that a command issued in Rome could reach a provincial governor in Hispania or Britannia in a matter of weeks, not months. This rapid communication allowed for an astonishingly uniform system of law and administration to be implemented across the entire Mediterranean world. A citizen in a distant province crossing a Roman bridge to take his goods to a market town was participating in a system that made him feel, and legally be, Roman. The bridge was a daily, tangible reminder of the empire's power, presence, and protection. It fostered a shared identity, turning a subject population into stakeholders in the immense project of Roman peace, the Pax Romana. This power to unify and pacify had a direct and crucial impact on imperial security. A remote region connected by a reliable bridge was far less likely to rebel. Why? Because the bridge meant that the central authority was not a distant, abstract concept. It meant that tax collectors would arrive on schedule, that judges would come to settle disputes, and most importantly, that legions could appear with shocking speed if trouble arose. The potential for rapid military response was a powerful deterrent against rebellion. Conversely, a region with poor connections was a breeding ground for secessionist ideas and local warlords. The bridge, therefore, was a psychological tool as much as a physical one. It shrank the empire in the minds of its people, making the central government feel immediate and accessible. It allowed for the efficient extraction of resources, yes, but it also allowed for the distribution of benefits, justice, security, and commerce that justified the imperial project in the eyes of the governed. In the grand, delicate balancing act of ancient governance, the bridge was the steadying hand, the critical infrastructure that turned a collection of conquered territories into a unified, functioning state. It was the enduring stone and fiber proof that those in power could not only take, but also give, connect, and maintain. While emperors and generals saw bridges as tools of empire, for the everyday person living in the shadow of these great structures, they were something far more intimate and essential, the very heart of community life. Beyond the march of legions and the caravan of spices, bridges served as the communal living room, the main street, and the town square, pulsing with the daily rhythm of human connection. They were places where grand imperial designs gave way to the simple, profound need to gather, to trade, to worship, and to celebrate together. This transformation of a transit point into a social anchor is one of the most beautiful and often overlooked functions of these ancient wonders. Travel to medieval Europe and you would find bridges that were not mere crossings, but entire micro-villages suspended over water. The most famous example is the Old London Bridge, completed in 1209. To call it a bridge is almost an understatement. It was a bustling, chaotic, and vibrant neighborhood in its own right. By the late medieval period, it was crammed with over 200 multi-story buildings, shops, homes, inns, and even a chapel dedicated to Thomas Becket. Your journey across wouldn't be a quiet stroll. You'd be jostling through narrow, shop-lined passageways, the air thick with the smells of baking bread, brewing ale, and roasting meat from the numerous food vendors. You could stop to have your shoes mended, buy a new knife, or listen to a street performer, all while the Thames flowed steadily beneath your feet. This incredible density of life wasn't unique to London. The Ponte Vecchio in Florence, with its iconic jeweler shops, or the Charles Bridge in Prague, adorned with statues of saints that turned it into an open-air cathedral, served similar purposes. These bridges were the economic and social epicenters of their cities, places where commerce and community were inextricably intertwined. The constant flow of people from all walks of life, nobles, merchants, artisans, farmers, created a dynamic social melting pot, fostering a shared urban identity that was literally built upon a shared foundation. This concept of the bridge as a sacred and social space finds a breathtaking parallel across the world in Japan. The Kintai-Kaiyo, or Broken Brocade Bridge, in the city of Iwakuni is a masterpiece of wooden arch construction, originally built in 1673. Its elegant, sweeping curves are not just an engineering solution, they are a work of art designed to elevate the spirit, but its true magic is revealed during annual festivals and seasonal celebrations. The bridge and its surrounding park become a focal point for the entire community. In spring, families gather under the cherry blossoms for Hanami picnics, the bridge providing a stunning backdrop for contemplation and celebration. During summer festivals, the structure is illuminated, its reflection shimmering on the river below as a gathering point for fireworks and traditional dances. The act of crossing the Kintai-Kaiyo was never just about getting to the other side. It was a ritual, a moment of transition from the mundane to the sublime, a shared experience that reinforced cultural traditions and bound the community together through collective memory and beauty. It was a stage for the drama of daily life and seasonal change. This social function was often baked right into the very design and governance of these structures. Many medieval bridges were built and maintained not by a king's decree, but by religious brotherhoods or guilds who saw their upkeep as a pious act of charity for the common good. They might build a chapel on the bridge, offering travelers a place for safe prayer, and priests a chance to solicit donations for maintenance. This created a self-sustaining cycle where spiritual care supported physical infrastructure, which in turn supported the community's economic and social health. The bridge became a monument to collective effort and shared responsibility. It was a place where news was exchanged, where contracts were sealed with a handshake, where young people met, and where the pulse of the town could be taken simply by observing the comings and goings. In an age before digital networks, the bridge was the original social platform, a physical space that facilitated the human connections that are the true bedrock of any society. It taught people that they were part of something larger than themselves, not an abstract empire, but a tangible, vibrant community, forever linked across the flowing waters that had once divided them. Yet beyond their roles as social hubs and tools of empire, ancient bridges occupied a far more profound space in the human imagination. They became powerful symbols woven into the very fabric of myth, religion, and our collective search for meaning. Long before an engineer laid the first stone, the concept of a bridge was already alive in our stories, representing the most fundamental human yearning, to cross over from the known to the unknown, from the mortal realm to the divine, from a life of trials to an afterlife of peace. This symbolic weight transformed physical bridges into something sacred, infusing their construction with a spiritual purpose that often transcended their practical use. One of the most iconic examples shines down from the heavens themselves in Norse mythology, the shimmering, rainbow-hued bridge known as Bifrost. This was no ordinary structure. It was a burning, three-strand bridge of light that connected the world of humanity, Midgard, with the celestial realm of the gods, Asgard. Guarded by the watchful god Heimdallr and his mighty horn Gjallarhorn, Bifrost was not a path for everyone. It was a sacred conduit for the gods to travel between worlds, a symbol of the fragile yet magnificent link between the divine and the mortal. Its fiery nature suggested both its incredible power and its peril. The myths tell that it would shatter at the coming of Ragnarök, the end of the world, signifying the catastrophic collapse of the cosmic order. The image of this radiant bridge captures a universal longing, a desire for a tangible connection to something greater than ourselves, a pathway for prayer to be heard and for divine influence to reach our world. It represents the hope that the gap between heaven and earth is not insurmountable. This theme of a bridge as an instrument of divine will and heroic devotion is echoed powerfully in the great Hindu epic, the Ramayana. It tells the story of Prince Rama's quest to rescue his wife Sita from the demon king Ravana in Lanka. His greatest obstacle is the vast ocean separating him from his goal. In an act of profound devotion and humility, Rama prays to the ocean god for passage. When his prayers seem to go unanswered, he prepares to unleash his celestial power to dry up the waters themselves. Witnessing this, the ocean god suggests a more constructive solution: build a bridge. What follows is one of the most famous scenes in all of mythology. Rama's army of Vanaras, or monkey-like beings, work with divine nature itself, writing the name of Rama on stones and throwing them into the water, where they miraculously float, forming a causeway, the Rama Setu, or Adam's Bridge. This was not merely a feat of engineering, it was a collective act of bhakti, or devotion. Each stone was a prayer, each step an article of faith. The bridge itself became a testament to the idea that unwavering devotion can achieve the impossible, building a path where there was only a void. It symbolizes the bridge of faith that a believer builds to reach the divine, a tangible result of righteous action and divine grace working in concert. This symbolic resonance is found across countless cultures. In Zoroastrianism, the Chinvat Bridge is a terrifying and moralistic span that every soul must cross after death. For the righteous, it appears wide and welcoming, leading to paradise. For the wicked, it turns razor-sharp and narrow, causing them to fall into the abyss of darkness. Here, the bridge is not a physical structure, but a profound metaphor for the ethical consequences of a life lived, a direct manifestation of one's own actions. In Japanese Shinto tradition, bridges are often seen as sacred boundaries, marking the transition from the mundane, profane world into the purified space of a shrine, a place where the kami, or spirits, reside. Even in ancient Roman tradition, the Pontifex Maximus was the title for the high priest, literally meaning the greatest bridge builder, signifying his role as the crucial mediator between the gods and the people of Rome. This deep-rooted symbolism had a very real and tangible impact on why and how physical bridges were built in the ancient world. Constructing a bridge could be seen as a pious act, an imitation of the god's own work in connecting realms. A patron funding a bridge was not just a civic benefactor, they were performing a deed of spiritual merit, earning favor in this life and the next. This layers our understanding of these structures with a richer meaning. The stone arch wasn't just an engineering solution, it was a prayer in masonry. the woven grass cable wasn't just strong fiber. It was a thread in the fabric that connected a community not only across a canyon but to its ancestors and its gods. They were built to last not just for economic or military reasons, but because they represented timeless truths about transition, connection, and the human journey itself. To cross a bridge was to reenact a myth, to participate in a small, daily ritual of hope that we, too, can cross from our struggles to a better shore. But how did they do it without computer models, without steel reinforcement, without modern machinery? The builders of the ancient world created structures that have outlasted entire civilizations. The secret lies not in some lost, magical technology, but in a profound, hard-won understanding of materials, physics, and the environment, a masterful application of ingenuity that turned local resources into timeless monuments. Each great civilization developed its own unique engineering language to speak to the challenges of its landscape, and by deciphering these techniques, we can truly appreciate the genius etched in stone and fiber. The Romans, of course, are the first masters that come to mind, and their greatest gift to engineering was the perfection of the arch. But their true breakthrough was the material that made their colossal arches possible, a revolutionary concrete that seems to defy the ages. While we think of concrete as a modern invention, Roman engineers developed a formula that was, in many ways, superior. Their key ingredient was pulvis putulonis, a volcanic ash quarried from the area around Pozzuoli near Naples. When this ash was mixed with lime and water, it created a mortar of incredible strength and, astonishingly, a unique ability to cure underwater. This meant they could build piers in the middle of rushing rivers, creating foundations that were not just strong, but actually gained resilience from the very element that usually destroys masonry. They would construct massive wooden caissons, hollow boxes, drive them into the riverbed, pump out the water, and then fill them with this miraculous concrete, creating indestructible footings. Then, using complex wooden scaffolding and centering frames, they would meticulously lay the voussoirs, the wedge-shaped stones of the arch, knowing that once the keystone was slipped into place at the apex, the entire structure would transform. The weight of the bridge and its load would be converted from a downward force into a sideways thrust, channeling the pressure along the curve of the arch and directly into the sturdy piers and abutments. This was the Roman genius. They understood that a well-built arch doesn't just carry weight, it dances with it, transforming a crushing burden into a stable, balanced force that could span distances previously thought impossible. On the other side of the world, in 7th century China, an engineer named Lai Chun was confronting a different set of challenges on the Zhao River. A solid, semicircular Roman arch required enormous, heavy abutments to contain its thrust, and it created a steep, almost impassable hump in the middle of a bridge. Lai Chun's solution was a stroke of pure brilliance, the segmental arch. His masterpiece, the Anji Bridge, uses an arch that is not a half circle, but a much gentler, flatter segment of a circle. This single innovation had multiple revolutionary effects. First, it drastically reduced the bridge's overall height, making the ascent and descent far easier for carts and pedestrians. Second, and more importantly, it significantly reduced the horizontal thrust against the riverbanks, meaning the abutments could be smaller and the structure was far more stable in the soft, sandy soil. But Lai Chun didn't stop there. To make the bridge even more resilient, he pierced the spandrels, the solid walls between the arch and the roadway, with 4 smaller auxiliary arches. This wasn't just for decoration, it was a profound understanding of hydrodynamics. During the violent monsoon floods, these smaller arches allowed water to pass through the bridge, drastically reducing the pressure on the structure from the raging current and preventing it from being swept away. The Anji Bridge stands today as the world's oldest open spandrel segmental stone arch bridge, a testament to an engineering philosophy that sought not to dominate nature with brute force, but to work with it through elegant, intelligent design. Perhaps the most astonishing contrast to these stone giants lies high in the Andes Mountains, where the Inca Empire faced a geography that defied conventional bridge building. Deep, wind-scoured gorges made stone arches impractical, and the frequent earthquakes would shake such rigid structures to pieces. The Inca solution was the ultimate exercise in using what was available, iku grass. Communities would gather this tough, native grass and twist it into increasingly thick ropes, a process overseen by specialists who understood the material's properties intimately. These ropes were then woven together into massive cables, some as thick as a human torso. 3 of these primary cables would form the walkway, while 2 higher cables served as handrails. The entire structure was then lashed together with smaller ropes, creating a flexible, organic web. This flexibility was its greatest strength. When the fierce mountain winds howled through the canyons, the bridge would sway and breathe with them, dissipating the energy that would shatter stone. When an earthquake struck, the bridge would dance on the tremors rather than resist them. This was engineering based on resilience and renewal. The Aswachaka Bridge, and others like it, were not built to last forever in a single form. They were rebuilt by the community every year or two in a powerful ritual that reinforced social bonds while ensuring the structure's perpetual vitality. It represents a completely different school of thought, one where durability is not measured by millennia of immobility, but by centuries of continuous, careful maintenance and adaptation, a partnership between people and their environment that is as strong as the cables they weave together. To truly grasp the scale of Roman ambition, we need to look no further than the humble yet mighty bridges they left scattered across their empire, from the heart of Italy to the distant frontiers. These were not isolated feats of engineering. They were the critical, load-bearing nodes in a vast and systematic network designed for one overarching purpose: total integration. The Roman Empire understood that to dominate such a colossal territory, they needed to move things, legions, messages, goods, and officials, with a speed and reliability that their adversaries could not match. Their bridges were the ultimate expression of this logistical genius, turning geographic obstacles into conquered pathways and ensuring that the will of the emperor could be felt in the most remote province within weeks. Consider the Pons Fabricius, which still stands proudly in Rome today, a testament to its original builder, Lucius Fabricius. Completed in 62 BCE, it connects the Campus Martius to the Tiber Island. Walking across it now, you tread on the same original travertine and peperino stone that has borne the weight of history for over 2,000 years. Its enduring strength comes from the Roman perfections we've discussed: the volcanic ash concrete, the precise voussoir arches, and the ingenious use of a larger central arch flanked by a smaller one to better manage the Tiber's flow. But its true significance was immediate and practical. For the burgeoning city of Rome, it was a vital artery, easing congestion and connecting key districts, facilitating the daily movement of citizens, soldiers, and supplies that kept the capital's heart beating. It was a statement in stone. Rome was a city of permanence, order, and unparalleled engineering. Yet the real story of Roman bridge building unfolds far beyond the city's 7 hills. The empire's true power was projected through its provincial infrastructure, and Spain offers some of the most spectacular examples. The bridge at Alcantara, whose very name derives from the Arabic term for the bridge, is a breathtaking sight, leaping 194 feet across the deep Tagus River gorge. Inscribed on it is a dedication to the Emperor Trajan, and its builder, Gaius Julius Caesar, famously declared it was meant to last for all the ages of the world. This was no empty boast. Its 6 towering granite arches, built without mortar, relying solely on precise stone cutting and the compressive force of the arch, have done just that. But why here? This was a strategic military crossing, a crucial link in the road network that allowed Roman legions to move swiftly between Lusitania and the rest of the Iberian Peninsula, securing a province rich in gold, silver, and agricultural wealth. It was a bridge built for control and extraction, a physical manifestation of Rome's reach. Similarly, in modern-day Turkey, we find the remnants of bridges like the one near the ancient city of Pergamon. These structures were integral to the sprawling web of roads that connected the wealthy eastern provinces to the capital. They allowed for the efficient transport of exotic goods from Asia, the movement of legions to guard the volatile eastern frontier against Parthian threats, and the swift travel of imperial tax collectors and provincial governors. The design of these bridges was often remarkably standardized. While they adapted to local materials using local stone or following the lay of the land, the core principles of the arch and the sturdy pier were consistently applied. This wasn't just an engineering preference, it was a policy. Standardization meant efficiency. An engineer dispatched from Rome to Gaul or North Africa would know exactly how to build a bridge that met imperial specifications, using a familiar and proven set of techniques. This replicable model allowed for the rapid and reliable expansion of infrastructure, which in turn accelerated the process of Romanization, the spread of Roman law, language, and culture. This network of bridges created a powerful feedback loop of control and assimilation. A secure bridge meant a secure road. A secure road meant a thriving trade route. A thriving trade route attracted settlers, created prosperous towns, and gave local populations a tangible stake in the maintenance of the Roman peace. The safety and economic opportunity provided by this infrastructure made the idea of Roman rule more palatable, even welcome, to many conquered peoples. It demonstrated the benefits of belonging to the empire. The bridge was, therefore, both a symbol of conquest and a tool of pacification. It showed that Rome had not only the military might to take a territory, but also the administrative will and technical skill to improve it, to weave it permanently into the fabric of a connected, interdependent world. The relentless, efficient, and enduring nature of these structures is what truly supported the weight of an empire, carrying its influence across every river and ravine from the misty highlands of Scotland to the sun-baked deserts of Syria. While the Roman legions marched across their stone arches to consolidate an empire on the other side of the world, a different kind of connection was being woven, one not of conquest, but of commerce and culture, spanning the vast and varied expanse of Asia. The legendary Silk Road was not a single road at all, but a sprawling, shifting web of overland and maritime routes, a nervous system for the ancient world whose most critical and vulnerable points were often its bridges. These structures were the indispensable lifelines that made the entire audacious enterprise possible, turning a romantic notion of East-West exchange into a tangible, relentless flow of goods and ideas that would forever alter the course of human history. Imagine the perspective of a Silk Road merchant guiding his groaning, dust-covered caravan of Bactrian camels. His journey from the oasis city of Dunhuang in western China towards the markets of Samarkand was a gauntlet of natural perils, searing deserts, freezing mountain passes, and most unpredictably, raging rivers fed by glacial melt. A sudden downpour in distant peaks could transform a gentle stream into a torrential, impassable barrier in hours, threatening to strand the caravan for weeks, spoiling perishable goods and inviting bandits. This is where a bridge like the one outside Dunhuang became not just a convenience but a savior. While its specific architectural details may be lost to time, its role is crystal clear from historical accounts. It was a stable, reliable crossing over the treacherous Dang River, a gateway from the Chinese heartland into the Hexi Corridor and the Taklamakan Desert beyond. For that merchant, the sight of its sturdy arches or timber pilings meant safety, predictability, and the preservation of his precious cargo of silk, lacquerware, and china. It was the difference between profit and ruin, turning a capricious natural obstacle into a manageable toll point on a calculated journey. This reliability is what allowed the Silk Road to function not as a sporadic adventure, but as a sustained and systematic engine of trade. But to view these bridges merely as facilitators of luxury goods is to miss their profound, world-changing impact. They were the physical conduits for what historians call the Great Convergence, the meeting and melding of Eastern and Western knowledge. A caravan crossing a bridge in the Fergana Valley of Central Asia carried far more than just silk rolls and spice sacks. In the saddlebags of scholars and missionaries were ideas, the seeds of technologies that would revolutionize the world. The knowledge of papermaking, a Chinese innovation that replaced cumbersome bamboo strips and expensive parchment, traveled west across these very spans. This technology would eventually reach the Islamic world and then Europe, where it would fuel the Renaissance and the scientific revolution by making the written word affordable and accessible. Similarly, astronomical charts and navigational tools developed in the East were exchanged for Western innovations in glassmaking and metallurgy at the bustling caravanserais that inevitably grew around these vital river crossings. The bridge was the unassuming, essential link in this chain of intellectual transmission, a place where a chance meeting between a Chinese alchemist and a Persian astrologer on a sturdy stone span could, over centuries, alter humanity's understanding of the universe. It provided the stable platform upon which these fragile, priceless commodities of thought could be safely exchanged. This cultural diffusion extended deeply into the realm of faith and art, creating a unique synthesis along the Silk Road's path. Buddhist monks traveling from India to China relied on these bridges to safely carry their sacred texts and iconography. As a result, the artistic styles of Gandharan sculpture, which itself showed a fascinating blend of Greek and Indian influences, thanks to Alexander the Great's earlier incursions, flowed eastward. The iconic Buddhist cave art of Dunhuang's Mogao grottos, with its flowing drapery and realistic human forms, bears the distinct mark of this cross-cultural artistic dialogue, a dialogue that would have been impossible without the secure passage provided by the region's infrastructure. Likewise, motifs from Persian textiles and Roman mosaics found their way into Chinese designs and vice versa, creating a shared visual language across continents. The bridge facilitated a silent, constant conversation between cultures, allowing for a mutual influence that was voluntary and organic, not imposed by conquest. It enabled a form of globalization that was based on mutual interest and admiration, where the most sought-after exports were not just material goods, but styles, beliefs, and aesthetic principles. The legacy of these Silk Road bridges endures not in their physical remains, which are often scant, but in the interconnected world they helped create. The very fact that we can speak of a shared human history, of the transfer of technologies like gunpowder, the compass, and the printing press from east to west, is a direct result of these networks of connectivity. They helped weave a tapestry of shared knowledge where the threads of Chinese, Indian, Persian, Arab, and European civilizations became inextricably intertwined. They proved that vast distances and formidable geography could be overcome by human ingenuity and the universal desire for exchange. The next time you use a piece of paper, glance at a star chart, or admire a work of art that blends different traditions, remember the silent, steadfast bridges of the Silk Road, the humble, powerful pillars that held up the weight of a world learning to share its greatest treasures. High in the thin air of the Andes, where condors soar and cliffs plunge into dizzying abysses, the Inca Empire faced a logistical nightmare that would paralyze most civilizations. Their domain was a vertical world of jagged peaks and deep river gorges, a landscape that defied the very concept of connection. Roman stone arches, so mighty on flat ground, would be shaken to rubble by earthquakes and rendered useless by terrain too steep for their foundations. Yet, the Inca response to this challenge stands as one of the most breathtaking examples of human ingenuity in all of history. They looked at the unforgiving geography and saw not an obstacle, but an opportunity to build bridges not from stone, but from grass. The key to their genius was a humble, resilient material, iku grass. This tough native grass, which thrives on the high Andean puna, became the literal fiber that held the empire together. The process of creating a bridge was a marvel of community-based engineering. Local families, under the direction of a master bridgewright, would first harvest the long grasses. Then they would twist and braid them into small cords, a task often done by hand and foot in a rhythmic, practiced motion. These cords were then woven together into larger ropes, and those ropes were finally braided into the massive cables that would form the bridge's backbone. The final product was a suspension bridge consisting of 3 primary cables for the footpath and 2 higher ones for handrails, all lashed together with a web of smaller ropes to create a secure, albeit flexible, pathway. The most famous surviving example is the Quehuashuachaca Bridge, which spans the Apurimac River. What makes this bridge truly extraordinary is not just its construction, but its renewal. Unlike a stone bridge built to last millennia, the Inca understood their organic material had a lifespan. Rather than see this as a weakness, they transformed it into a profound cultural strength. Every single year, for what historians believe has been over 600 years, the communities from the 4 surrounding villages gather for a 3-day festival to renew the Quehuashuachaca. This is not a simple repair job. It is a complete rebuilding from the ground up, a ritual that follows the same exact techniques used by their Inca ancestors. Men work in teams on both sides of the gorge, braiding the new cables in situ, guided by the wisdom of the elders. Women prepare food and weave the smaller ropes, and the entire endeavor is infused with prayers and offerings to the Apus, the mountain spirits, asking for protection and strength. The result was a transportation network that was perfectly adapted to its environment. A stone bridge would crack in an earthquake, but a fiber bridge sways and dances with the tremors, dissipating the energy. The fierce winds that roar through the canyons simply make the bridge breathe and shift, rather than strain against a rigid structure. These bridges, some stretching over 100 feet long and dangling dizzyingly high above river rapids, became the indispensable arteries of the empire. The Inca's legendary messenger system, the chasquis, relied on them to run their relay messages across the empire at astonishing speed. Troops could be moved to quell rebellions, and llamas carrying goods, from dried potatoes to ceremonial goods, could traverse terrain that was otherwise utterly impassable. But to view the Quehuashuachaca and its siblings merely as engineering solutions is to miss their deepest purpose. They were not just infrastructure, they were a physical manifestation of the Inca principle of mita, community labor for the common good. The annual rebuilding is a powerful act of social cohesion, a time to strengthen familial and communal bonds, to pass ancient skills from one generation to the next, and to reaffirm a shared identity and connection to the land. The bridge is more than a crossing. It is a living monument to collective effort and cultural resilience. It teaches a timeless lesson that the strongest structures we build are not made of stone and steel, but of shared purpose, mutual trust, and the enduring will to reach across any divide together. While empires used bridges to project power across continents, these structures exerted an equally powerful, yet more intimate, influence closer to home, literally shaping the very ground beneath the feet of ancient city dwellers. A bridge's location was never arbitrary. It was a deliberate act of urban prophecy, a declaration that a city would grow in a specific direction. Once built, it became an irresistible focal point, pulling people, commerce, and architecture toward it, forever dictating the layout and rhythm of urban life. The story of a city and its bridges are often one and the same, a tale of how a simple crossing can become the heart of a metropolis. The city of Rome provides the quintessential example of this transformative power. For centuries, the Tiber River was a natural boundary, with the city's core confined to its eastern bank. The first permanent bridge, the Pons Sublicius, was a sacred wooden structure, but it was the later stone bridges like the Pons Fabricius and Pons Cestius that truly cemented the river's future. They were not built because the city had expanded. They were built so that the city could expand. These sturdy stone arches were invitations, beckoning development across the water. Almost immediately, the Transtiberum region, the land across the Tiber, transformed from a sparsely populated area into a vibrant, bustling district. It became a hub for immigrants and bustling trade, particularly for the river-based traffic that now had a direct link to the city's core. The bridges turned the Tiber from a defensive moat defining the city's edge into a central artery running through its middle. This shift didn't just make Rome bigger, it made it more complex and interconnected, with the bridges serving as the vital valves regulating the flow of its daily life, ensuring both banks thrived as a single, unified urban organism. This pattern of bridge-led growth repeated itself centuries later in medieval London, but with an even more dramatic and crowded intensity. The original Roman settlement of Londinium was on the north bank of the Thames, but it was the construction of London Bridge, first in timber by the Romans and later in stone beginning in the 12th century, that truly ignited the city's southern expansion. The bridge was such a colossal and expensive undertaking that it immediately became the most valuable piece of real estate in England. To maximize its worth, houses, shops, and even a chapel were built directly onto the bridge itself, creating a stunning, multi-story street suspended over the water. This wasn't just a crossing, it was a destination. The bridge acted as a powerful magnet, pulling urban development toward its endpoints. On the south bank, the neighborhood of Southwark exploded into a chaotic, vibrant suburb. It was a zone of inns and taverns catering to travelers who had just completed their journey across the bridge, theaters like Shakespeare's Globe that attracted crowds from the entire city, and bustling markets that serviced the constant traffic. The bridge didn't just connect two separate banks, it fused them into a single economic unit, with the bridge itself as the thriving, noisy, commercial spine. This phenomenon of the bridge as an urban catalyst was a global one. In Florence, the Ponte Vecchio was not only a vital crossing over the Arno, but a designated center of commerce. By decree, the city's butchers and later its goldsmiths were concentrated on the bridge, intentionally keeping the smells and fires of their trades away from the main city squares, while still placing them at the heart of the city's trade routes. The bridge became a specialized commercial district in its own right, its very function baked into the urban plan. Similarly, the Charles Bridge in Prague was so much more than a connection between the old town and the Prague Castle district. It was a grand, ceremonial promenade lined with magnificent statues of saints, effectively serving as an open-air cathedral and the city's most prestigious public square, a place to see and be seen. Its design and usage show how a bridge could be engineered not just for transit, but to foster civic pride and religious expression, becoming the symbolic and cultural centerpiece of the urban landscape. The urban planning principles at work here are profound and still relevant today. A well-placed bridge promotes densification, encouraging the efficient use of land on both sides of a waterway and preventing urban sprawl. It creates what planners call activity nodes, those vibrant hubs of economic and social life that naturally coalesce around major transportation interchanges. The ancient builders, perhaps without knowing the modern terminology, understood this intrinsically. They knew that by building a bridge, they were not merely solving a transportation problem. They were planting a seed from which an entire urban ecosystem would grow. The bridge determined the placement of roads, which dictated the layout of property lines, which influenced where markets, workshops, and homes would cluster. It was the first domino in a chain reaction of urban development. A city's geography might provide the raw canvas of hills and rivers, but it was the bridges that drew the defining lines, connecting the dots of human settlement and transforming a collection of buildings into a living, breathing, and deeply interconnected city. Yet for all their profound utility in war, trade, and administration, the ancient world's greatest bridges reveal an ambition that soared far beyond mere functionality. They were conceived not just as tools for crossing, but as canvases for cultural expression, powerful statements of identity carved in stone and wood. This was where the engineer's slide rule met the artist's chisel, where cold calculation was married to breathtaking beauty, transforming a mundane piece of infrastructure into a lasting monument to human creativity. These builders understood that a bridge, by its very nature, commands attention. It is a focal point in the landscape, a place where all eyes naturally gather. And so they seized that opportunity to make a statement, to imbue their work with a sense of grandeur, grace, and meaning that would resonate for millennia. We need look no further than the sublime Pont du Gard in southern France to witness this philosophy in its most majestic form. This Roman aqueduct bridge, built in the 1st century, is a staggering 3 tiers of precisely cut golden limestone arches marching across a river valley. On a purely practical level, it was a masterwork of hydraulic engineering designed to carry fresh water to the city of Nims, but to dismiss it as merely functional is to miss its entire purpose. The Romans, particularly under Augustus, were masters of propaganda through architecture, and the Pont du Gard is a prime example. Its design is a study in perfect symmetry and proportion, each level carefully articulated to create a sense of rhythmic harmony and overwhelming power. The use of elegantly protruding pedestals that once supported scaffolding now serve no purpose other than to break up the visual monotony of the stonework and add a dynamic shadow play. There is absolutely no structural reason for the bridge to have 3 tiers. A single, massive arcade would have sufficed, but that would have been merely efficient. The triple-decker design is an intentional display of imperial prowess and aesthetic refinement, a bold declaration that Rome could not only conquer nature but could do so with breathtaking elegance. It was meant to awe the local population, to symbolize the civilized order and technological superiority that Rome brought to the provinces. It was power made beautiful. This desire to adorn the practical is echoed on the other side of the world, in the exquisite stonework of ancient China. The Marco Polo Bridge, or Lugu Cairo, outside Beijing, is celebrated not for its colossal size, but for its mesmerizing artistic detail. While its core structure of 11 graceful arches is a fine piece of engineering, what truly defines it is the breathtaking array of stone lions that line both sides of the bridge. No two are exactly alike. Some are playful cubs peeking out from under their mothers. others are fierce guardians baring their teeth, and many hold ornate orbs or strike dynamic poses. Counting them is a traditional pastime for visitors, with the number always seeming to change. These sculptures transform a simple crossing into a spiritual pathway, a gallery of stone mythology meant to protect travelers and signify strength and prosperity. Furthermore, the bridge is adorned with stelae and pillars inscribed with poetry, turning it into a literal open-air manuscript of cultural values. It wasn't enough to simply get from one bank to the other. The journey itself was to be an experience of beauty and contemplation, a reminder of the cultural and artistic values that the civilization held dear. This fusion of form and function reveals a fundamental truth about these ancient societies. They refused to separate art from daily life. A bridge was a public utility, but it was also a public space, and therefore it deserved to be beautiful. The artistic choices, the symmetry of the Romans, the intricate carvings of the Chinese, the rhythmic repetition of arches, were never frivolous add-ons. They were integral to the structure's identity and purpose. This artistry served to elevate the bridge from a forgotten piece of infrastructure to a cherished landmark, a source of communal pride that people would fight to preserve. It enhanced the structure's symbolic importance, making it not just a connector of places, but a symbol of the culture that built it, their values, their gods, their aesthetic sensibilities, and their place in the world. The ancient builders were leaving a legacy, yes, but they were also crafting an experience for the person crossing it, ensuring that every passage was not just a journey, but a moment of encounter with something greater than themselves. Imagine facing a roaring, silt-laden river during the spring melt, armed with little more than hand tools, raw muscle, and your own intellect. This was the daily reality for ancient engineers, for whom the environment was not a mild inconvenience but a formidable, active adversary. Their success wasn't about conquering nature with brute force. It was a masterclass in listening to it, learning from it, and ultimately collaborating with it. Every bridge they built was a unique conversation with the landscape, a carefully considered response to a specific set of geographical and environmental challenges that demanded both respect and radical innovation. Consider the relentless power of moving water, perhaps the most constant foe. A river is not a static ditch. It is a living, pulsing entity that changes with the seasons. A shallow, placid stream in the summer could become a devastating, bank-swallowing torrent in the spring. Roman engineers, with their obsession for permanence, developed a brilliant solution: the cutwater. These were not just simple, rectangular piers. They were triangular or semicircular extensions built onto the upstream side of the bridge's supporting columns. Think of them as the prow of a ship, permanently stationed to face the current. Their sharp, angled design did not try to stop the water's force. It elegantly parted it, slicing the current and deflecting debris like tree trunks and flood-borne rubble around the delicate sides of the pier. This drastically reduced the erosive scour at the foundation, the #1 cause of bridge failure. It was a profound understanding of hydrodynamics, working with the water's energy instead of futilely resisting it. But water wasn't the only challenge. The very ground beneath their feet could be a treacherous foe. In earthquake-prone regions like parts of Anatolia or the Himalayan foothills, a rigid stone structure could be its own worst enemy. The same solidity that provided strength against gravity became a fatal liability when the earth began to shudder. Here, builders in ancient cultures like India and China demonstrated a different kind of wisdom. They often employed a dry stone technique, meticulously carving interlocking stones that fit together with incredible precision, but without mortar. Why? Because during a quake, a mortared structure acts as a single, brittle unit that cracks under the strain. A dry stone structure, however, has a tiny amount of give. The stones can shift and shudder, dancing with the earthquake's energy, and then settle back into place once the tremors subside. This principle of flexibility over rigidity was a life-saving innovation, born from careful observation of how the natural world responds to stress. Perhaps no civilization better exemplifies the art of environmental adaptation than the Inca, high in the Andes. Their world was one of extreme verticality, of deep gorges scoured by vicious, unpredictable winds that could turn a rigid structure into a shattered wreck. Their answer was the iconic rope bridge woven from native grasses. These bridges didn't fight the wind, they embraced it. Their inherent flexibility allowed them to sway and dance with the gusts, dissipating the energy that would have shattered stone. The Incas understood that in their world, resilience was not about being unyielding, but about being able to bend and adapt. This extended to their materials. They didn't import foreign stone, they used the tough, fibrous iku grass that thrived in the high-altitude puna. This wasn't a compromise, it was a strategic choice. The material was locally abundant, renewable, and perfectly suited to the dynamic forces it needed to withstand. The annual rebuilding ritual of the Quehuachaka Bridge ensured the structure never aged into brittleness, perpetually renewing its strength in a cycle that mirrored the natural world itself. Even the climate itself dictated design choices. In regions with extreme seasonal variation, builders had to account for the expansion and contraction of materials under the baking sun and freezing cold. They learned to incorporate expansion joints long before the term was coined, often using softer materials or designing slots that allowed the stonework to breathe and move without cracking. In floodplains, they might build longer approaches or raised causeways, anticipating that the river would occasionally need to reclaim its space. This wasn't seen as a failure of the design, but as a necessary part of coexisting with a powerful natural system. This ancient approach offers a powerful lesson for our modern era of climate change and sustainable development. Today, we often approach engineering with a mentality of control, pouring immense resources into making the environment conform to our blueprints. The ancients worked in reverse. They let the environment write the blueprint. They were the original masters of bio-inspired design and sustainable local sourcing. Their legacy teaches us that the most enduring structures are not those that stand defiantly against nature, but those that humbly, intelligently, and gracefully find their place within it. They show us that true innovation isn't always about inventing something new. Sometimes it's about listening carefully to the ancient wisdom of the world around us. It's a humbling experience to walk across a span of stone that has carried generations, to stand where a Roman legionary, a medieval merchant, or an Inca messenger once stood, feeling the profound weight of history beneath your feet. This is the living legacy of ancient bridges, a testament not only to their original builders but to every generation that has recognized their value and chosen to preserve them. These structures are far more than static monuments. They are active participants in our modern world, continuing to serve their original purpose while whispering the secrets of the past to those who cross them today. Their survival is rarely an accident. It is the result of conscious, often heroic, efforts to safeguard our shared human heritage against the relentless march of time and the carelessness of progress. Consider the magnificent Alcantara Bridge in Spain, a masterpiece of Roman engineering that has spanned the Tagus River for nearly 2,000 years. Its very name, derived from the Arabic word for the bridge, signifies its enduring, irreplaceable role. It has endured wars, floods, and centuries of use, but its survival into the modern era required direct intervention. During a conflict in the past, one of its arches was damaged, threatening the entire structure. Rather than demolish it, engineers studied the original Roman techniques and carefully reconstructed the damaged section using the same principles of the arch and the same local granite, ensuring its integrity for centuries to come. This is preservation in its truest form, not simply freezing a structure in time, but understanding its original genius and applying that same wisdom to maintain its life and function. Similar stories unfold in Iran, where ancient arch bridges like the Coc Pol in Isfahan are not just protected as tourist attractions but remain vibrant public spaces, integral to the daily rhythm of the city, their arches reflected in the water as they have been for 400 years. These ongoing preservation efforts are a declaration of value. They state unequivocally that some connections are too precious to lose, that these bridges are chapters in a story we are still writing, and that maintaining a physical link to our engineering forebears is a responsibility we willingly accept. This legacy extends far beyond the stones themselves, directly influencing the very fabric of our modern world. Contemporary engineers and architects increasingly look to the past not for nostalgia, but for sustainable, time-tested solutions. The Roman use of volcanic ash pozzolan, which created a self-healing concrete that actually strengthens in contact with water, is now the subject of intense scientific study, with researchers aiming to reverse engineer this ancient recipe to create more durable and environmentally friendly modern concrete. The Inca principle of building flexible, renewable structures from local, natural materials is a guiding light for today's bio-inspired design and sustainable architecture movements, teaching us that resilience can be found in adaptation rather than brute force. Even the elegant segmental arch of the Anji Bridge, which allowed for a flatter, more stable profile, finds its echo in the design principles of modern bridges that must withstand immense stress and strain. The ancient builders were masterful material scientists and ecologists, working with their environment rather than against it, and their empirically derived solutions are proving to be remarkably sophisticated. This isn't just historical curiosity. It is a vital exchange of knowledge across centuries, where the challenges of the past inform the innovations of the future. Ultimately, the enduring presence of these bridges speaks to something fundamental within us: the timeless, universal human need for connection, and the profound desire to create something that outlasts our own fleeting lives. They are the ultimate symbols of this aspiration, physical proof that a society's ambition and skill can transcend its own mortality. We build bridges to connect communities in the present, but we also build them as a message to the future, a declaration that we were here, that we mastered our environment, that we reached out to one another. When we choose to preserve an ancient bridge, we are not just saving stones and mortar. We are honoring that original intent. We are acknowledging that the drive which built them is the same drive that fuels us today. They connect us to history by allowing us to literally walk in the footsteps of our ancestors. They connect us to culture by serving as enduring symbols of artistic and engineering achievement. And perhaps most importantly, they connect us to each other by reminding us of our shared humanity and our perpetual journey to overcome divides, both physical and metaphorical. Their continued existence is a powerful, silent conversation between the past, present, and future, a conversation about who we are, what we value, and the lasting marks we hope to leave behind. Think about the last time you learned a new word from a friend or picked up a phrase from a movie. Languages are living, breathing things, constantly evolving through contact and exchange. Now, imagine that process happening not over the internet or through television, but on the stone deck of a 2,000-year-old bridge. These structures were far more than silent sentinels over rivers. They were bustling, noisy linguistic crossroads, where the very words we use today were bartered, blended, and born anew. Every cart that rumbled across their arches, every traveler who paused to rest at its midpoint, carried with them not just goods, but the sounds and syntax of their homeland, turning these engineering marvels into unlikely engines of linguistic revolution. The most profound example of this phenomenon unfolded across the vast network of Roman bridges. Picture a soldier from Gaul stationed in a remote outpost in Hispania. To get there, his legion marched across countless bridges, each one carrying him further from his Celtic roots and deeper into the sphere of Latin. On those bridges, he would converse with merchants from Rome, local settlers, and fellow soldiers from North Africa and the Middle East. The Latin they spoke wasn't the polished, literary form of Cicero. It was a practical, evolving lingua franca, a working language of trade and administration. This daily, face-to-face interaction on these vital crossing points was the crucible in which Latin melted and reformed. The rigid case endings of classical Latin began to simplify for ease of use. Local words for everyday things like cabalus for horse instead of the classical equus were adopted into common speech and carried across these bridges by the next wave of travelers. This constant, organic exchange, facilitated by the unimpeded travel the bridges provided, is what gradually transformed vulgar Latin into the early seeds of Italian, Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Romanian. The bridge didn't just connect two banks of a river, it connected a Germanic soldier's grammar with an Iberian farmer's vocabulary, and in doing so, helped build a whole new language. This story of linguistic fusion was repeating itself simultaneously on the other side of the world, along the intricate web of trade routes crisscrossing Asia. A sturdy bridge over the Indus River or a stone span in a Himalayan pass was more than a safe crossing. It was a linguistic marketplace. A Sanskrit scholar traveling to a Buddhist monastery might pause on such a bridge to share a meal with a Parthian trader. In that moment, the Sanskrit word for sugar, shakara, might have been heard and adopted by the trader, who would carry it westwards where it would eventually become sakar in Arabic and sugar in English. Similarly, the Chinese word for tea, cha, traveled along these bridged routes overland to Central Asia and Russia, while the Min-Nan dialect word ter went by sea to Western Europe. The bridges along the overland routes ensured these words had a path to travel, facilitating a cross-continental exchange that shaped global vocabulary. Scripts, too, began to influence one another at these points of contact. The flowing aesthetic of Arabic script might have subtly influenced the development of regional calligraphic styles as merchants and artists met and exchanged techniques at these well-trodden river crossings, proving that bridges could carry the visual shape of language just as easily as its sound. This blending did more than just create new words. It built the very foundation for mutual understanding and diplomacy between vastly different cultures. When a Byzantine diplomat and a Turkish emissary met on a bridge to negotiate a treaty, they weren't just two representatives of warring empires. They were, on a fundamental level, two speakers. The very act of meeting at this neutral, connecting space necessitated a linguistic middle ground. They might have relied on a hybrid trading pidgin, a simplified language born from necessity, that borrowed nouns from one tongue and verbs from another. This bridge language allowed for the complex ideas of peace, trade agreements, and borders to be communicated, preventing misunderstandings that could lead to war. The bridge, by its very nature as a connector, fostered an environment where compromise was not just political but linguistic. It forced a melting pot of dialects and languages into a functional, shared tool for communication, demonstrating that the path to peace often begins with the shared effort to simply understand one another. So the next time you use a word with a forgotten foreign root or effortlessly understand a friend from a different region, remember the ancient bridges. They were the silent stages where the scripts were written and the lines were first spoken, proving that the most enduring thing they carried wasn't silk or spice, but the very words we use to define our world and connect with each other. Yet behind the movement of armies and the chatter of markets, another quieter but far more profound revolution was taking place on these ancient bridges, a revolution that would literally reshape the dinner plates of the world. Long before the term globalization was ever coined, the humble bridge was facilitating the most fundamental form of exchange, the trade of the very plants that feed humanity and the wisdom of how to grow them. This wasn't just about exotic spices for the wealthy. This was about the slow, steady, and transformative migration of staple crops and agricultural knowledge that would break down the walls of culinary isolation and allow civilizations to thrive in ways previously unimaginable. Picture a caravan slowly making its way across a stone bridge in the Taklamakan Desert, each camel laden with sacks of seeds, not just silk. For a farmer in ancient China, the primary grains were millet and rice. But thanks to the secure passages provided by bridges along the Silk Road, a new grain began to arrive from the west: wheat. This wasn't a simple substitution. Wheat offered something revolutionary: the ability to be ground into a fine flour that could be baked into leavened bread, a food that could be stored for longer periods and provided a dense source of calories. The bridges enabled this slow-motion agricultural swap, allowing wheat to travel east and become a cornerstone of northern Chinese cuisine, while simultaneously rice cultivation techniques began their journey westward. In Persia and the Mediterranean, where wheat was already king, the arrival of rice introduced a versatile, high-yield crop that could be grown in flooded paddies, transforming previously marshy or difficult-to-irrigate land into productive fields. This exchange, made possible by reliable overland routes, dramatically increased the caloric output of entire regions, supporting larger, more stable populations and providing a buffer against the failure of any single crop. This story of agricultural transformation finds a powerful parallel in the Americas, where the geography was just as challenging, but the engineering solutions were entirely different. The vast Inca Empire, connected by its network of resilient rope bridges, managed a realm of incredible verticality, from coastal deserts to high-altitude plateaus. This required a mastery of diverse microclimates, and the bridges were the informational highways that allowed this knowledge to flow. A farming technique developed on a sun-drenched terrace near the coast, perhaps a new way to irrigate maize, could be shared with communities in the high Andes via messengers crossing the Huachuca Bridge. But the most world-altering exchange was that of the potato. Domesticated in the Andes, the potato was a nutritional marvel, capable of growing in poor soil and at high altitudes where other crops failed. Across the woven grass bridges of the Inca, different varieties of potato were traded and shared, creating a vast genetic library of resilience. Similarly, maize or corn, cultivated for millennia in Mesoamerica, traveled along trade routes that relied on river crossings, spreading north and south to become a staple for diverse cultures. Without these connective pathways, these crops would have remained localized wonders, their potential to feed millions left untapped for centuries. The impact of this bridged agricultural exchange went far beyond just adding new items to the menu. It was about the transfer of an entire ecological intelligence. A farmer wasn't just receiving a sack of strange seeds, he was gaining access to generations of accumulated knowledge. The bridges allowed for the movement of people, the farmers themselves, who would travel to new lands and bring their hands-on understanding of crop rotation, irrigation, soil management, and pest control. This sharing of best practices created a form of ancient agricultural resilience. If a drought struck a region reliant solely on one grain, the knowledge of how to cultivate an alternative, drought-resistant crop that had arrived via a trade route could mean the difference between survival and famine. This interconnected web of knowledge, strung together by these vital crossings, made societies more adaptable and secure. It was a silent, ongoing collaboration between distant farming communities, a collaboration that ensured the collective survival and prosperity of the human species by weaving a global safety net of food security long before the concept ever existed. Yet for all their power to unite and nourish, the very bridges that fostered connection also presented an irresistible opportunity for control, revealing a darker facet of human nature where the desire to dominate often overshadowed the impulse to connect. These structures, celebrated as symbols of openness, could with startling ease be transformed into instruments of coercion, taxation, and bloody conflict. The same arch that welcomed a merchant one day could serve as a gallows the next, a stark reminder that any point of convergence is also a potential point of vulnerability, a chokehold that the powerful have always been quick to exploit. Throughout medieval Europe, the scene at a major bridge was rarely one of free passage. More often, it was a place of transaction, scrutiny, and frequently resentment. Sturdy stone toll houses were built directly into the bridgeheads, functioning as custom stations and revenue collection points. Here, a merchant hoping to bring his wares into a city would be forced to halt his cart, unpack his goods, and submit to the assessment of a toll-keeper appointed by the local lord or bishop. The fees could be arbitrary and exorbitant, a percentage of the goods' value, a flat rate per wheel on the cart, or a special tax for specific items like salt or wool. This wasn't merely a user fee for maintenance, it was a primary source of income for the ruling class, a way to profit directly from the economic activity the bridge itself generated. Disputes over who had the right to collect these tolls, a local baron, a monastic order, or the king himself, often erupted into violent conflicts. Control of the bridge meant control of the purse strings of regional trade, turning these structures into financial battlegrounds where the cost of connection was constantly negotiated, often at the point of a sword. In times of open war, the strategic value of a bridge shifted from economic to existential. It became the ultimate choke point, a geographical fulcrum upon which the fate of armies and nations could balance. A well-defended bridge allowed a smaller force to hold off a much larger one, funneling the attackers into a deadly bottleneck where their numerical advantage was nullified. The ancient Romans knew this well, but the lesson was repeated with brutal clarity in countless medieval and early modern battles. The story of Horatius Cockles holding the Sublicious Bridge against an Etruscan army became a legendary template for this kind of heroism. In a more historical example, battles for bridges like the one at Stirling during the Scottish Wars of Independence were not side engagements. They were the main event because whoever held the crossing held the key to the entire region. The converse was also tragically true. The destruction of a bridge was a common and devastating defensive tactic. A retreating army would often burn or dismantle the very structure their predecessors had labored to build, sacrificing a vital piece of their own infrastructure to slow an advancing enemy. This act, while tactically sound, was a heartbreaking admission of defeat that could isolate communities, strangle commerce, and take generations to reverse. Furthermore, bridges were often the scenes of horrific, last-stand massacres, as fleeing soldiers and civilians found themselves trapped between a relentless enemy and an uncrossable river. The peaceful river crossing of peacetime could become a killing ground of unimaginable terror when the political winds shifted, its solid stone rails witnessing atrocities instead of greetings. This inherent duality forces us to hold two contrasting truths in our minds at once. The bridge is both a symbol of community and an instrument of control, a bringer of prosperity and a magnet for conflict, a monument to public good and a source of private profit. Its history is not a simple, triumphant march of progress, but a complex and often contradictory story that reflects the full spectrum of human ambition. To only celebrate their unifying power is to tell half the story. We must also acknowledge that these connectors were, and still are, powerful levers that can be pulled to divide, to tax, to dominate, and to kill. This darker aspect does not diminish their achievement. Instead, it deepens our understanding of them, reminding us that human ingenuity does not exist in a moral vacuum. The same mind that designs an arch to bring people together can also design a gatehouse to keep them out, proving that the most enduring structures are ultimately defined not by their stone and mortar, but by the often flawed humanity they serve. But beyond their stone and timber, these magnificent structures also took root in the fertile soil of our imagination, becoming powerful, recurring characters in the stories we've told for centuries. In folklore, poetry, and legend, the bridge is rarely just a setting. It is a potent symbol, a threshold between the known and the unknown, a testing ground for heroes, and a place where the mundane world brushes against the magical. These narratives reveal a deep, almost primal understanding that to cross a bridge is to undergo a transformation, to leave one state of being and enter another, and this universal human experience echoes through our oldest tales. Consider the simple, chilling logic of the fairy tale trope, the troll under the bridge. This creature doesn't live in the forest or the river. It chooses the one point of crossing, the one place where the hero has no choice but to confront it. The bridge becomes a trial, a gauntlet that must be passed. Whether it's the three billy goats gruff or a knight in a forgotten fable, the protagonist must pay a toll, either through cunning, strength, or sacrifice, to earn the right to cross. This isn't just a story to frighten children. It's a profound metaphor for the obstacles we all face on our personal journeys. The bridge represents the challenge itself, the job interview, the difficult conversation, the leap of faith, and the troll is the fear, doubt, or adversity we must overcome to reach the greener pasture on the other side. It teaches us that progress always has a cost, and that valuable destinations are guarded by trials. This symbolic weight grows even richer and more complex in the hands of great literary authors. In Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, written in the early 14th century, the poet's entire journey through hell, purgatory, and paradise is one immense spiritual crossing. But bridges appear within the narrative itself, most notably in the Inferno, where the poets must traverse a series of crumbling rock bridges spanning the deadly ditches of the Eighth Circle. These are not safe passages, they are perilous, often broken pathways over a landscape of eternal punishment. Crossing them is an act of witnessing the consequences of sin, and each step is fraught with danger. Here, the bridge is no longer just a challenge to be passed. It becomes a narrow, precarious path of righteousness arching over the chaos and evil of the world. It symbolizes the difficult, deliberate effort required to maintain one's moral integrity in a fallen world, a path that requires a guide and immense personal courage to navigate. Traveling to Japan, we find an entirely different but equally deep cultural resonance with bridges in folklore. In Shinto tradition, bridges are seen as sacred liminal spaces, boundaries between the human world and the spirit world. The mythical first bridge, Aim no Yukihashi, or the floating bridge of heaven, was the connection between the celestial realm of the gods and the earth. This imbues every bridge with a sense of the divine. In countless folktales, bridges are the chosen meeting place for encounters with kami spirits, yokai, supernatural beings, and ghosts. A famous tale tells of a young man who shelters from rain under a bridge only to be confronted by a mysterious, beautiful woman who may be a benevolent spirit or a vengeful ghost. The bridge is the threshold where her world intersects with his. Furthermore, the act of crossing a bridge is often used as a metaphor for transitioning from one stage of life to another, from ignorance to enlightenment, or from turmoil to peace. The elegant curves of a Japanese bridge are not just architectural beauty, they are a visual representation of a spiritual ascent and descent, a journey of the soul that is both physical and metaphorical. These stories use the bridge to explore themes of fate, choice, and the subtle, often unseen connections between our world and the forces that shape it. From the fairy tale troll demanding a price for passage to Dante's soul walking the razor's edge between damnation and salvation, and the Japanese spirit waiting at the threshold for a life-changing encounter, these stories all point to one universal truth. The physical bridge, in all its engineered glory, was so powerful a presence in daily life that it could not be confined to the material world. It spilled over into our dreams, our myths, and our art, becoming a timeless shorthand for life's greatest challenges, transitions, and mysteries. They tell us that when we stand at the end of a bridge, we are not just looking at the other side of a river, we are staring at a reflection of our own journey, with all its perils, choices, and hopes for what lies beyond. But when we marvel at these ancient spans, whose stories are we actually hearing? For centuries, the historical narrative has been dominated by the names of great engineers like Gaius Julius Caesar, or the imperial decrees of emperors like Trajan. These figures commanded the projects and claimed the glory, but they represent only a fraction of the human effort required to tame a river with stone and rope. The true story of these connections is written by the countless unnamed hands that did the actual work. The laborers, the artisans, and crucially, the women and marginalized communities whose vital contributions have been systematically overlooked by the historical record. To only credit the master architect for a bridge is to credit only the conductor for the symphony. We must listen for the entire orchestra, especially those players who have been silenced for too long. Consider the iconic Inca rope bridges like the Huayhuachoca. We speak of Inca engineering genius, and rightly so, but we must ask, whose genius was it? The annual renewal of the bridge was, and still is, a communal event that involves entire families from the surrounding villages. While the men often work in teams on the dizzying heights, braiding the massive new grass cables, the women are the indispensable foundation of the entire operation. They are the ones who harvest the tough iku grass, a task requiring deep knowledge of the local ecology and the optimal time for cutting. They then painstakingly twist and braid the grass into the smaller cords and ropes that the men will later weave into the primary cables. This isn't just helping. This is skilled, specialized labor that forms the very backbone of the construction process. Without their meticulous preparation, the entire project would halt. Furthermore, they manage the crucial support systems, preparing food and chicha beer to sustain the workers, organizing celebrations, and preserving the oral traditions and techniques that are passed down to the next generation. Their role is not peripheral. It is central to the bridge's existence, embodying a collaborative model where every community member, regardless of gender, has a vital part to play in maintaining the connection that sustains them all. This pattern of essential yet unheralded contribution repeats itself across cultures, even if the records are frustratingly sparse. In medieval Europe, the construction of a major stone bridge was a massive undertaking that required a small city of workers beyond the stonemasons. Who managed the vast logistics camp, who fed the hundreds of laborers, who provided the basic but critical services of cleaning, mending clothes, and caring for the sick and injured. The answer is almost certainly women, whose unpaid and domestic labor formed the invisible infrastructure that supported the visible infrastructure. They may not have been carving the voussoirs, but they were undeniably part of the building effort. Furthermore, once a bridge was completed and shops and houses were built upon it, like on London Bridge, women were almost certainly involved in running those businesses, as brewers, bakers, shopkeepers, and innkeepers, turning the engineering marvel into a living, breathing community. Their economic activity on the bridge was a direct continuation of the building process, transforming stone and timber into a hub of social and commercial life. Even in more structured societies like ancient Rome, where military engineers and state-appointed architects took center stage, the physical labor was performed by a vast underclass of workers, slaves, legionaries, and paid laborers from the lower ranks of society. The legions, often credited with building bridges, were not just soldiers. They were a massive, mobile labor force drawn from across the empire, including conquered peoples. A soldier from Gaul or North Africa might have spent years quarrying stone and moving earth for a bridge he would never have his name attached to. His contribution, though coerced or compelled by service, was no less critical. These marginalized individuals were the muscle and sinew of Rome's architectural dominance, their collective effort literally paving the roads that integrated an empire. Yet history remembers the name of the emperor who commissioned the work, not the thousands of hands that made it real. Acknowledging this fuller history does not diminish the achievements of ancient engineering. It enriches them beyond measure. It corrects a skewed narrative that favors the architect over the artisan, the commander over the laborer. It reveals that bridge building was never the solitary pursuit of a lone genius, but a profoundly collective endeavor, a symphony of diverse skills, from the woman weaving a grass rope with practiced hands to the enslaved worker moving a stone block into perfect alignment. It was this collaboration, this merging of countless forms of knowledge and effort, that truly built the connections which shaped our world. These structures stand not as monuments to individual men, but as testaments to the power of community, reminding us that the most enduring connections we create are built on a foundation of shared purpose and unrecognized toil. Standing beneath the towering, sleek form of a modern suspension bridge, it's easy to see our era as the absolute pinnacle of engineering, a world apart from the stone and rope of antiquity. But if you look closer, past the gleaming steel and poured concrete, you'll find a continuous thread of human ambition connecting our time to theirs. The fundamental purpose remains unchanged: to conquer distance, to span the impossible, and to bind our world closer together. The tools and materials, however, tell a story of both dazzling innovation and, in some ways, a subtle shift in priorities, inviting us to ask a profound question about our built environment. In our relentless drive for efficiency and scale, what other values might we have left behind? The most obvious divergence is in our material palette. Ancient builders were masters of local sourcing, turning to the earth itself for their components: quarried stone, timber, and even woven grass. Their genius lay in understanding the inherent properties of these materials and designing structures that worked in harmony with their strengths and limitations. The Roman arch is the perfect example, a shape that turns the crushing weight of stone into a stable, self-supporting form. Modern engineering, by contrast, is defined by manufactured materials. The development of structural steel and reinforced concrete in the 19th century was a revolution that shattered previous limits on span and height. These materials give us incredible tensile strength and flexibility, allowing for the breathtaking, seemingly weightless leaps of bridges like the Millau Viaduct in France, which floats above a valley like a ribbon of road in the sky. This material shift grants us unimaginable speed and scale, but it also often severs the connection between a bridge and its local environment. A steel girder looks the same whether it's in Texas or Taiwan. This leads to a second, crucial difference: the relationship between the bridge and the community it serves. Ancient bridges were almost always deeply integrated into the daily fabric of life. They were markets, social hubs, and even homes, as seen on the old London Bridge. Their construction was a communal endeavor, often taking years or even decades, and their ornamentation, the carvings, statues, and inscriptions reflected the cultural identity and artistic values of the people who built them. A bridge was a point of civic pride. Modern infrastructure, for all its awesome capability, often follows a different logic. The driving imperative is frequently efficiency, throughput, and cost-effectiveness. The goal is to move the maximum number of people and goods from point A to point B as quickly and safely as possible. This has given us incredible feats of logistics, but it can also result in functional, utilitarian structures that prioritize traffic flow over human experience. We build overpasses and interchanges that we pass under or through at high speed, rather than spaces we linger on. Yet, to claim that modern engineering has completely abandoned the wisdom of the past would be a mistake. The ghost of the Roman arch is alive and well in countless modern concrete bridges and aqueducts, its principle of load distribution still fundamentally sound. More importantly, a new movement in contemporary design is actively looking backward for inspiration, finding profound lessons in ancient sustainability. The Inca practice of annually renewing their rope bridges with local, biodegradable materials is a radical model of circular economy and community-based maintenance, standing in stark contrast to our often extractive and waste-producing methods of construction. Similarly, the Roman use of volcanic ash pozzolan, which created a self-healing concrete, is now the subject of intense research as we seek to develop more durable and environmentally friendly alternatives to our own carbon-intensive concrete. The ancient world understood resilience as a partnership with nature, a concept we are urgently relearning as we face the challenges of climate change. So, what does this comparison ultimately reveal? It shows our evolution, not a simple story of progress. We have gained unimaginable scale, speed, and safety. We can build higher, longer, and faster than any ancient civilization could have dreamed. But we may have lost, in many cases, the sense of place, artistry, and community intimacy that turned ancient bridges into cherished social centers and cultural landmarks. The lesson isn't that we should stop building with steel and return to stone. It's that the most visionary future infrastructure might brilliantly fuse these two worlds. Imagine a bridge that uses carbon fiber composites for impossible spans, but also incorporates green spaces for pedestrians, hosts local markets on its deck, and is designed with a unique aesthetic that reflects its specific location and community. The ancient builders teach us that infrastructure is more than just a conduit for traffic. It is a stage for human life, a statement of values, and a potential gift to the future. The greatest tribute we can pay to their legacy is to build our own bridges with not just technical mastery, but with a renewed heart for the human spirit they are meant to connect. But the influence of these structures extends far beyond the physical realm, seeping into the very language we use to describe our inner lives and our relationships with one another. The bridge has become one of our most enduring and powerful psychological metaphors, a universal shorthand for the journey of the human spirit. This isn't a coincidence. It's a direct result of living for millennia with these awe-inspiring structures that quite literally showed us a way across the uncrossable. They provided a tangible blueprint for concepts like transition, connection, and reconciliation that were otherwise too abstract to grasp. the renowned psychologist Carl Jung saw the bridge as a profound symbol of the conscious mind's journey into the unconscious. In his view, crossing a bridge in a dream wasn't just about moving from one place to another. It represented a critical transition in the dreamer's psychological state, a venture into the unknown territories of the self. It symbolized a willingness to leave behind the familiar shores of one's current understanding and brave the depths below to reach a new, more integrated state of being. This journey isn't without its perils. The river beneath might represent the turbulent, unpredictable flow of emotions or the hidden depths of the psyche, but the bridge itself offers the possibility of safe passage, of making the unconscious conscious. It's a symbol of the ego's strength and its ability to build connections between disparate parts of our personality, forging a whole self out of fragmented pieces. This metaphorical power escapes the confines of therapy and dream analysis to shape our everyday language in the most practical ways. We talk about building bridges between opposing political parties or estranged family members. We speak of burning bridges when we sever ties, often with a sense of finality and loss. We encourage someone facing a difficult life change by saying they are transitioning or crossing over to a new chapter. These aren't just tired cliches, they are cognitive tools rooted in a shared understanding of what a physical bridge does. They allow us to conceptualize complex emotional and social processes as a manageable physical journey. The metaphor gives us a sense of agency. We can be the builders of these connections. It implies effort, engineering, and intention, suggesting that reconciliation and understanding are not passive states of being but active constructions that require skill, material, and will. This symbolic weight transforms the physical act of crossing a bridge into something more than mere transit. When you walk across an ancient span like the Ponte Vecchio, you are not just moving from one bank of the Arno to the other. You are participating in a ritual that humans have performed for thousands of years. You are enacting the very idea of connection. Each step can feel like a meditation on moving from a place of conflict to a place of resolution, from isolation to community, from the person you were to the person you are becoming. The bridge becomes a physical prayer for unity, its arches echoing the effort it takes to reach out, to span a divide, and to finally meet in the middle. It stands as a permanent stone and mortar rebuttal to despair, a testament to the human conviction that no gap is too wide, no obstacle too great, and no river too raging that we cannot, somehow, find a way to build a path across it. For all the magnificent bridges that have endured through the ages, standing as proud testaments to their builders, there exists a parallel world of ghosts, spans that have vanished into the mists of time, known only through fleeting mentions in ancient texts, half-eroded inscriptions, or the tantalizing whispers of local legend. These lost bridges represent the great unfinished puzzle of history, reminding us that our understanding of the past is built as much on fragments and questions as it is on stone and mortar. The quest to find them is a thrilling blend of detective story and high-tech treasure hunt, one that pushes the boundaries of archaeology and keeps the story of these ancient connectors vibrantly alive. Take, for instance, the elusive bridges of the Roman Empire. We have meticulous records from historians like Livy and Tacitus that mention crucial bridges built during military campaigns, yet their precise locations remain hotly debated by scholars. One famous example is the bridge supposedly built by the Emperor Trajan across the Danube River during his Dacian Wars, an achievement celebrated on Trajan's Column in Rome. The column clearly shows a magnificent wooden span, a temporary but colossal feat of engineering. For centuries, historians argued over its exact location and even its very existence, until modern archaeological surveys and sediment core samples finally identified what are believed to be its submerged wooden pilings near the town of Drobte-Turnu-Severin. Yet, even with this evidence, the full structure and the exact methods of its construction remain subjects of intense study and speculation. It's a reminder that a mention in a text is just the beginning of the story. The physical evidence often lies hidden, waiting for the right technology and the right pair of eyes to discover it. This detective work is now increasingly moving beneath the waves. Underwater archaeology has revolutionized the search for lost bridges, revealing entire landscapes that were once dry land. As sea levels have risen since the last ice age, countless coastal settlements and their connecting infrastructure now lie submerged. Sonar scans and submersible drones are now surveying these underwater worlds, uncovering incredible finds. The remains of a potential Bronze Age bridge have been investigated in the Solent, the strait between mainland England and the Isle of Wight, suggesting a lost land connection that would rewrite our understanding of prehistoric Britain. In the eastern Mediterranean, divers have explored the sunken ruins of the ancient city of Iliea, where the foundations of a Roman bridge now provide a habitat for marine life, its arches silently presiding over an aquatic realm instead of a bustling roadway. Each of these discoveries is like finding a missing piece of a global jigsaw puzzle, slowly helping us reconstruct the ancient networks of trade and travel that shaped the classical world. But perhaps the most captivating mysteries are those shrouded in myth and folklore, where history and legend become inseparably intertwined. The most famous of these is the Rama Setu, or Adam's Bridge, a chain of natural limestone shoals that stretches between India and Sri Lanka. Geological studies confirm it is a natural formation, but the incredible ancient Hindu epic, the Ramayana, tells a different story. It describes this very chain as a bridge built by an army of Vanaras, or ape-like beings, for the god King Rama to cross over to Lanka to rescue his wife Sita. The debate over its origin, purely natural or built upon a natural foundation by human hands, sparks passionate discussion even today, showing how a bridge can transcend archaeology to become a powerful article of faith and a symbol of national identity. It forces us to ask where the line between geological fact and cultural truth lies, and why the human desire to find a bridge, both literal and metaphorical, is so deeply ingrained in our stories. These unresolved enigmas are not frustrating dead ends. They are the engine of history. They are what drive archaeologists to sift through mud in riverbanks, what leads historians to retranslate ancient texts looking for overlooked clues, and what inspires engineers to run new computer models on Roman construction techniques. Every unanswered question is an invitation, a challenge to the next generation to look at the past with new tools and new perspectives. The story of ancient bridges is not a closed book sitting on a shelf. It is a live excavation site, where every passing year has the potential to unveil a new discovery that could change our understanding of how our ancestors connected their world. This ongoing quest ensures that these silent stone sentinels will continue to speak to us, not just about the glory of what we know, but about the thrilling potential of all we have yet to learn. As our journey across these ancient pathways comes to a close, we're left with a profound realization. These structures were never simply about getting from one side to the other. They were the physical manifestation of humanity's most enduring ambitions: to reach, to connect, to understand. We've walked in the footsteps of Roman legions on sturdy stone arches that projected imperial power, marveled at the delicate woven grass of Inca bridges that turned impossible gorges into community bonds, and traced the flow of ideas along Silk Road spans that carried more than silk. They carried the very seeds of philosophy, faith, and innovation that would shape civilizations. Each bridge, from the humblest timber footbridge to the most grandiose arched monument, tells a layered story. It's a story of engineering genius, certainly, but also one of economic hunger, cultural curiosity, and sometimes the dark realities of control and conflict. They reflect our best selves, our collaborative spirit and boundless creativity, and at times our worst impulses for domination and exclusion. This complex duality is what makes their legacy so rich and so human. Their true endurance lies not just in the stone that withstands the elements or the rope that is renewed each year, but in the intangible connections they forged. They helped weave isolated communities into empires, scattered dialects into languages, and local traditions into shared cultures. They are a testament to the idea that when we build bridges, we are doing more than altering a landscape. We are expanding the very possibilities of what we can achieve together. So the next time you cross a bridge, any bridge, take a moment. Feel the history beneath your feet. Think of the countless journeys that have come before yours. The merchants, the soldiers, the pilgrims, the lovers, all brought together by that fundamental human urge to overcome a divide. Let that simple act of crossing become a connection not just between places, but across time itself. We would love to hear your stories down in the comments. Do you have a favorite ancient bridge, or perhaps a modern one that feels like it has a story to tell? Share your thoughts and discoveries with this community of fellow explorers. And if you want to keep unraveling history's great mysteries with us, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. There are always more connections to discover, and we can't wait to share the next journey with you.